Welcome to Civil Coding Academy. What we are doing is actually pretty much the same, still on alignment. The only difference now is that I want to dwell on align content. Before now, we've been dealing with we started with justify content, from there we move on to align item, and now that we are through the align item, we are now into align content. So we talk about align content, we're talking about almost the same thing, just that now we're talking about content. So align content property says the alignment of the flex container's content along its main axis. Remember, all this why we're talking about main axis, cross axis, and y axis that make up the main axis. Okay, so you can use it to center the content, align it at the start or end, provide equal spacing between, like space between the content, or you can even stretch it out to fill out the container equally. Okay, why the default for it is normal. So for this, there are two schools of thought on this. Some include space evenly, space between, and space around, while others may tell that they don't want to include space evenly, or they might include space evenly and they don't want to include space around. So it all depends on how you see it, but as for me, I'm including everything, because even in our CSS, by the time we go to our VS Code, find out that even space evenly is right there. Okay, so what we mean by normal, like I told you, when you talk about align content, 8 items should come to your mind. 8. But if you decide to that is 7, it's okay by you. If you also decide with me that it should be 8, it's okay by you. The first one is your normal. The second one is your stretch, normal or stretch. Then immediately after that, all the other things we talking before now, like flex start, flex end, center, space between, space evenly, space around. But like I told you, you can move space evenly if you want to. Okay, but if I decide to include it, that makes it 8. So let's take that one by one. Normal, this is the default value of the item that are packed in a well. Okay, it just packing very well, pretty normal fashion, as if nothing is happening. That's why I call it default value. If you click on normal, it remains the same. We're going to see it very soon in a jiffy by the time we start coding live. Then what about stretch? This value distribute the items evenly within the container. Okay. Then what about flex start? Just like what we did before now, this value will pack items at the end of the container, topmost of the container. Okay. While flex end we do the otherwise, the opposite. This value will pack items at the end of the container. Why do I start at the beginning? The flex start at the beginning, while flex end is at the end of the container. You know, just get the what we've been discussing before now. What about center? This value will pack items around the center of the container. Okay, while space between, this value will distribute items evenly, with the first item being flush with the start of the container and the last item flush with the end of the container. We also have space evenly, and the space evenly will distribute evenly, with the first and last item having half size space at the start and end of the container. Okay, so that much I do. Let's go into the practical aspect and see how this works on real terms. So what have we covered so far? We've talked about align content, that it has align it aligns line of content along the cross axis and distribute any extra spacing in the parent container. Remember, we are still dealing with the parent container, and we are almost writing up the parent container. You'll say that it has flex start, flex end, center, space between, space around, stretch, and then space evenly. But I also say if you don't want to, you can decide not to include it. But for me, I'm including it. So let's go ahead and do it and see it practically how these things works. Okay. So I've created another, I've added my box. If you check our flex.html, I've added the box up to about 10 boxes or so. Okay. So now let's start our work. So for the first one, we'll start with the first, which is stretch. And remember, which is normal, and normal we say is the default, so normal won't do anything. But let's just do it so you see how it is. So we say align content, and we start with the first one, which is normal, and use your Ctrl S for save. You see everything is the same, no more changes, because normal is the default for align content. So let's start with the first one, which is flex start, Control S for save. You see it? So it starts at the beginning, at the top, right? At the top. So let's go to flex end. You go to the bottom. You start at the bottom. Though you can call it bottom, but depending on where your cross axis, where your Y and S axis is. So for now, you can say it's bottom, but sometimes it cannot be bottom, depending on where your axis lies. Okay. So let's move to center. Let's center it. Center. Press for save. This is the center. You center it properly. You see it complete centering at the right side. If you also want to, you can also make justify center and the left center. So if you want to achieve that goal, and that helps you, like what we'll talk about, align item and justify content. Put the two center. You don't need to make use of line height again, and that is the beauty of these things. So let's go to the next one, which is let's start to add space, distribute space now. So we'll start with the first one, which is, let me use space around. You see space around. You see distribute space all around. 1, 2, 3. This one has half, this one has half, this one has half. So that's what space around is. Always try to differentiate how it distributes the space, so that you can know space around, what space around is, and what space between. You can even differentiate between each of them. Okay. So always target to differentiate between each of them. So let's go to the next one, which is space between. And press for save. Look at it. So space between, we put the space because it's just two items. That means more than like 3, 4 rows, it will be equal. But at the two edge, there won't be any space. Okay, it won't give any space to them. While space around, we make sure that it give half space at the two ends. Don't always forget that. Okay. So let's do the other one. Space evenly, which I told you are included, and you see it here. See it there. It's included by VS Code. So including it is good. And look at it. Everything become equally, both at the edge, at the center, and at the other end of the edge. Okay. So the last one we want to talk about now is stretch, right? Let's go back to stretch. That's where we start from. Stretch. Press for save and stretch it back to normal. So this is how you can work with align content. Okay, and you also know the goal. This with content. What the other one deals with item. Justify content deals with everything to almost the same thing. They are similar, but there are little two differences. And I want to also make sure that you get those differences while working. For example, under align content, you have 8 properties that goes with it. Under justify content, you have 6 properties that goes with it. Under align item, you have 6 properties that 5 properties that goes with it. So you should be able to know each of those properties, memorize them, so you can be able to know it. Even though you don't memorize them, but just try to get the knowledge of them and how to use them. As a programmer, I won't encourage you to memorize, but always know things that will help you while running your programming or your web development. See you in our next class as we deal with another Flexbox item. Thank you for being there. Kindly subscribe if you've not done so. And if you're watching us on Facebook, you can, if you like what we are doing, kindly give us a star. So I'll just work supporting us, since this is a free tutorial. Thank you and see you.